I will be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all of the difference. Hello, out there, folks, out there in podcast land. This is your host, Dennis Carl, and this is another edition of The Road Less Traveled. And here is my other host, Mr. Gerald Fountain.
Good evening.
Hope everybody's having a great evening, starting out their week with here. And we're going to send some love and light out to our friends in California. They got a little bit shook up today. Things are getting a little shaky out there. I hope nobody was hurt. But we had some pretty bad earthquakes there. It had some bad aftershocks. So we definitely want to send some good vibes out to them.
Absolutely. That's right.
Yeah, it's been it was a busy weekend, and it's starting to shape up it being a busy week here, Gerald.
It is. It seems like time is flying by.
Hopefully that'll keep us out of trouble. I doubt it. It never works. It never works. I want to give a shout out to everybody gathering in the grotto here tonight. That's what I call the chat room, the grotto, okay?
The grotto.
And, want to say hello to Monica and Jason, somebody named Miss West Night Watchers, whoever that might be. The girl in her song. Gus's mom is here, Wizard Moon. All right. It's starting to gather in here. Absolutely. There's Hunting the Shadows chiming in here. And Miss Shiro is with us. Cosmic Joe. All right. We're slowly beginning to gather in here, definitely. Sandy Williams, hello. Blue-Eyed Bandit is back in town. I don't think she ever left town. Okay. And let's see who else we got. Anybody else coming in here? So there he is, the man himself, Bigfoot Dwarf. Hope you're doing okay out there, brother. Don't get too shook up now. Remember what James Bond said, Bigfoot Dwarf. Don't shake it, stirred, not shaken. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll get some more people in here. We'll get them in here. And we're going to have a good show for you tonight. We're going into some very dark territory here. Personal poison. You know, there's a lot of poisonous things in this world. There's poisonous snakes, bugs, spiders, fish. The list goes on and on and on. You even got some bad germs out there like E. coli and stuff like that, and then ready to jump you too. There's a lot of poison in this world, but when poison gets personal, that's when things get kind of freaky. Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about tonight. Personal poison. The things that people can do to poison you, what can poison you in this world, things that people put out to poison other people, sometimes whether they intentionally do it or not, it still gets done, definitely. So there's a lot of poisoning going on around here. Absolutely. Don't you think so, Gerald?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a tough thing. You know, some poisons that are in your household or you have everyday exposure to, it could be an accident, but then how do you prove whether it was on purpose or was an accident?
That's so true. You know, a lot of times you can do unintentionally poison things and not really realize, especially not, you know, I think about all these lawsuits have been brought against Roundup and all that stuff, you know, they went on and they were weed killing, but not realizing they were also poisoning people too. They used it, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, that's bad. When you think about it, although it was not intentional, I don't think on their part, it was still, you know, poisoning people. That's the way it goes. And like I say, that gets when it gets personal is when you start taking the poison. And like I mentioned before the show, Gerald, there's a very famous poison, you know, Snow White's apple. A long list of stuff like that. The Wizard of Oz, the witch and the Wicked Witch, you know, she poisoned Dorothy and all of them would poison Snow, you know. The list goes on and on with you know, poison being used as a weapon.
Yep.
Anything can be weaponized, just about. They taught that on John Wick. That man was nothing but a walking weapon, by the way. He killed a whole bunch of people in the bar with a pencil one time. Okay. I mean, anything can be used for bad. That's the way it goes, especially poison. But there are a lot of herbs and stuff out there, plants that, you need to stay away from. Now, the one that comes to mind, I remember from my childhood, I remember going out picking poke salad for my grandmother and all that to make poke salad with. And poke
Yep.
salad is poisonous, folks. You don't just go out in the wild and break off a piece off and start chewing it. You're gonna be in bad trouble. You have to what they call it parboiling poke salad. In other words, you got to boil it 2 or 3 times before you can eat it. That boils supposedly all the poison out of it. But you only use a certain part of the plant. You do not boil the roots, and you definitely do not eat the berries off of poke salad. Birds can do that, but you can't, because it is a deadly poison. It will get you. A lot of people do not realize the things all around us that can be poisonous that we don't, Like, look at the poinsettia that you get for Christmas, Beautiful flower, but it's a deadly poison. You don't want your pets around it. You don't want children to mess with it. You don't even want to touch it yourself that much, because you can get some of the stuff on your fingers. And that brings me to one of my most favorite poisonous plant of all. That's the angel trumpet plant. Now, you've seen these angel trumpet bushes in people's yards, big
Yep.
flowers look like trumpets hanging down, These things are deadly poisonous and very hallucinogenic. You will die hallucinating from these things if you get the juice on your hands. That's how deadly this stuff is.
Absolutely.
And, you got a lot of plants like that. You've got nightshade, you've got, wolfsbane. These are very poisonous plants. Wolfsbane name, I think, is a continent or content. It has a different name, but we call it wolfsbane. It kills wolves. It definitely will kill you. Okay. And it's been used to trap and kill animals before. You've got all these different plants. And, a lot of people don't realize it, Gerald, but you can eat the tuber of the potato, but you better not eat the flower.
Right.
The potato is kin to the nightshade. In the nightshade family as well. Think about it.
I mean, there's a lot of flowers and plants out there that if you take it in moderation, or if you dilute it the right way, then it can be good. It has a medicine to it, or a herbal formula for you to use. And but if you overuse it, just like all this stuff, if you just take it straight, or if you have a high potency of it, it will either make you deathly sick or unalive you.
Definitely, you have to like water it down to a certain extent. You get the medicinal value out of these things, so you have to be very careful. Though, that's just like the very wonderful drug of morphine. Okay, morphine is a wonderful drug. It's used to help ease a lot of people out of this world too, and it is good for pain, but it is highly addictive. Okay, and there are a lot of other. Look at cocaine. It was originally used in a derivative, and still is to this day, in types of medicine that they use and give out. It was once upon a time it was put in your Coca-Cola, folks. So, and that was a cough syrup, by the way. It was not meant to originally be drank as a soft drink. Yeah, it was a cough syrup. So, cough suppressant. But there's a lot of stuff, if you don't do it the right way, it can unalive you very quickly. And especially when you get to stuff that you can handle, like arsenic. Arsenic has been in a lot of stuff. I don't know. I know you know this, Gerald, probably. I don't know if a lot of people know this. A lot of the landscape timbers years ago and treated wood was treated. Guess what it was treated with, Gerald?
Yep, arsenic.
Arsenic. If you handled it a lot and put your fingers in your mouth or something, you might end up, I'm not going to say it might kill you, but it can make you rather sick. Definitely. And do some bad stuff to you. Now they had to quit doing that, because of the arsenic. Now there's something else. But they'll probably find out later that probably is just as poisonous in many ways. That's why when it comes to lumber, I like to wear my gloves. How about you, Joe?
Absolutely. Yeah, you definitely want to wear a respirator or some kind of mask if you're going to cut treated lumber.
Oh yeah, even the dust off something like that, and just like those angel trumpet plants, you can just inhale the the moisture from them, and will give you bad hallucinations. This stuff's bad, and I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but it's a hybrid. It actually comes from what my grandparents used to call a ghost plant. What we know it as Jimson weed, or also known as loco weed. The reason they call it that is cows in the field would get a hold of this weed, eat it, and they would go crazy. They'd bang their heads on fences, they'd kill themselves if it didn't poison them outright. And it is a nasty looking little weed, but it's pretty though. It has a pretty flower on it, and it looks like an angel trumpet. Although these don't droop over, these stand up, and they're not as big as the angel trumpets. They hybrid something else with this and made the angel trumpets. But you still got a poisonous plant, no matter which way you look at it.
Yep. And if you're going to make flower beds outside and use treated wood, make sure you line it with plastic or something so the arsenic doesn't leak into your soil and into your plant that you're going to eat or use or whatever you're going to do with it.
Arsenic does not go away, right?
Right. It stays there all the time.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the Native American peoples, they use these plants. A lot of these plants in their ceremonies and all that, but they knew how to make a derivative of them, to water them down or to get a certain amount of what they needed to get what they wanted to get done. But still, you could still accidentally overdose on something like that. You had to be very careful how you did these things, and not just the Native Americans, but a lot of cultures worldwide use these drugs and stuff in a lot of their religious ceremonies and stuff like that. They considered it a way to open the consciousness of the human mind and soul to the other world, That was part of the ceremonies. But it was dangerous stuff, too. You had to be careful how you mix the stuff and what you do with it. But as you and I both know, Gerald, these are where the granny witches started, the root doctors, the hoodoo men, as they used to call them. They knew all about these roots and herbs and plants and stuff in nature and and its properties and what it will do. Just take, for instance, the dandelion. The dandelion, a lot of people do not know this. People who have kidney problems take a lot of dandelion wine or dandelion syrup, as they like to call it. It can be a derivative of the dandelion plant. It's good. It's what they call a diuretic.
Right.
It's really good for your kidneys, So that's just one thing. You think that's a weed now you cut down when you cut your grass, okay? But look at its properties, and there's a lot of them stuff out there. And I've as being outdoorsman for a long time, and I've been doing a lot of cryptidology and all that stuff out there. I learned a lot of these things, especially what not what to eat and what not to eat, definitely, and things that that you see like the Midland plant and other things and what they do. I think you can use it on a wound and it stops blood flow pretty good.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good stuff you need to know out there about these plants. I said they had a dandelion salad. That sounds interesting. I was just reading some of the comments there. My father used to make dandelion wine. Yeah, I have tasted it. It wasn't fantastic to me, but maybe some people like it. But but this stuff have a lot of health benefits to these things, and a lot of people never realize that the wonder drug known as the aspirin comes from the bark of a willow tree.
Yep.
The ancient Egyptians knew about that, didn't they, Gerald?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, between the old civilizations and more current to us, Native Americans, they have a lot of herbal remedies and stuff that they would use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And did you know? This is a kind of nasty thing about, but Vikings used to pee on each other to sterilize their wounds. Okay, it does. It works. Supposedly, it does that. Unless you've got some kind of bad disease or something, it usually works in your favor. Um, yeah, a lot of things like that. That the old timers knew about this stuff. You know,
Yeah.
that's a lot. I'm afraid a lot of that's lost now. But there was a time when they knew how to treat. I'll put it this way, okay? Given a choice, Cheryl, back in those days, between a real doctor, or what he thought was a doctor about wanting to let your blood out and all this because your blood was hot or something, or a medicine man, I'd go with a medicine man. He would probably cure you better. He would probably treat you better than the doctor would, because
Yeah.
all they could do for you, they bled George Washington to death. They bled him to death because they thought they could, they let the blood out and they put the fever down, stupid stuff like that.
Yep.
And you know what? They were drinking alcohol, drinking, liquor, and never realizing once you could pour it on the wound and sterilize it. They found that out in the Civil War, though. That saved a lot of limbs. I hope it did. Anyway. That's what I'd be laying there and say, hey, I got a wound in my leg. Bring me a bottle of whiskey and I'll pour it on there. Thank you. Urine will neutralize the sting of jellyfish. Yeah, that's true. I've heard that. And vinegar also. Vinegar works on it as well. Vinegar is almost another one of those wonder drugs kind of things,
Yeah.
That's good for a lot of stuff. And not only that, it's a good cleaner too. Now, didn't we used to put vinegar, mix a little vinegar in with the egg dye for Easter?
Yes, we did.
So the dye would hold to the egg better or something, right? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Hello, Sonny. Sonny 11, good to have you here. She's a great supporter. She does a lot of work for us, definitely. Thank you so much for that. Your support is highly appreciated, Sonny 11. Absolutely. She's got a great vlog. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there, but let's look at the bad side. You got stuff being used all the wrong ways and stuff.
Yeah.
And I mentioned to you earlier about the Borgias. They were supreme at poisoning people, especially Lucretia. She had a ring that she kept her poison in, and she could dump some in your wine real quick. That's the way they got rid of their enemies. If they didn't like you, you didn't usually hang around very long after that.
A lot of sneaky stuff that you can put in people's drinks or food.
That's why they had food tasters. Kings would do that. You taste my food for me before I eat it. If you die, then I'll be all right. I don't think I want that job. No, thank you.
How long did you have to wait before the food tester you thought was okay?
Yeah, you had to wait a while. You go ahead and eat first, and 30 minutes later we'll check on you. See how you doing. My luck, Gerald, I'd get a king and everybody wanted to poison. You know what I mean? Yeah. If you have a tolerance, it will not go. You can build up a tolerance to certain poisons, but it's very tricky, and you have to be very careful and very meticulous how you do it. That's very much like a lot of the people in India that have been bitten by cobras. They finally get to the point where the poison of the cobra doesn't bother them, but if they could bite you, it might kill you. Because they've got enough of that poison in their system to do the job, That's not good thing. And this happens a lot in those snake cults that they have over there. We might have to do a show sometime on snake cult surgery because that's a fascinating stuff.
Yeah,
anyway,
snake handlers.
Curses that people can put on you and the things like that. Wild stuff. But they use a lot of snake venom and stuff like that.
Yep.
That is a natural poison if you look at it that way. There's some people, that's their job. They milk rattlesnakes, folks, for anti-venom,
Yeah.
You got to have the poison to make an anti-poison. That's the thing about it.
Snakes, and also they they milk scorpions.
Oh yeah, yes, milk scorpions and all that stuff. I'm glad that's not my job. I'll probably get messed up one day.
Well, you're bound to get a strike or get bit. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't do it forever and not ever get that.
Hopefully you save some poison to make your own anti-venom with, right? Just in case you need it. Yeah, I talked to just a quick story about that. I know the guy one time. He was a world's expert on snakes. This guy worked at a zoo in Florida, and that was his job. He handled some of the deadliest snakes in the world: the black mambas, fer-de-lance, cobras, king cobras, and all that. He said one day he handled it. He was an expert. He knew how to handle it. He could do it in his sleep. You know what I'm saying? This guy was smart. But he said one day he wasn't feeling good and came to work. He said, I still stayed home, And he said all it took was one, just letting the guard down for 1/2 a second. And that snake got him. He said, the next thing you know, he was in the hospital 6 months. About trying to get over it. That's all it takes. 1/2 of a second can get you.
I think I said it on one of your other shows. We talked about that. And I watched a documentary a long time ago about a guy that was a world's leader in snake venom. He collected it for all the laboratories and hospitals. And he got bit so many times by so many different poisonous snakes that his blood became the anti-serum for all these hospitals to draw off of. But then in his old life, he got crippled, his fingers, and started getting all twisted and bent. But he estimated at least 500 different times that he got bit. And sometimes he did it on purpose, just so he'd have a new venom in his blood, build up antibodies.
Well, that's the bad thing about snake venom. It not only poisons you, but it can destroy tissues and nerve systems. That's what it works on, and that's probably what happened to him. Your nervous system gives you the feeling in your fingertips, your toes, and all that stuff. Your nerves go all over your body, and when you miss some of them, you got a problem usually. I've seen people like in hospitals and all that have had some kind of nerve disorder, and they won't be able to pick up stuff with their hands, Yeah, it does it that way. And so that's what snake venom does to you, folks. Absolutely. So it's what very, very careful. Whenever I spend a lot of time out in the woods, I'm always very cautious about snakes, coming up on snakes and all that. Hello, Cryptid Huntress. Good to have you here, dear. And that goes with you too. Watching out for them snakes out there, definitely.
Absolutely, Jessica.
Because basically, if you way out in the middle of nowhere and you get bit by a rattlesnake, the chances of you making it back, are very dim. If you're next door to a hospital, you're okay, probably. You'll make it. But if you weigh like miles and miles out in the middle of nowhere, you better be very, very careful, because you could get unalived very easily. Absolutely. And to me, that is something you need to be very, very cautious about. Not just the other wild animals, but there are other things besides snakes. You got the brown recluse, you got black widows. You got, Australia's full of this stuff. Okay. You go to Australia, watch out, trapdoor spiders and all that stuff. You got a lot of that stuff going on too. So there's more. And look at the Gila monster. A lot of people don't realize out in Arizona, they have to really watch out for him. He's poisonous, poisonous lizard. There you go.
And it doesn't even have to be poisonous. You can get scratched by a cat or bit by a dog and have the bacteria off of their saliva or whatever and give you an infection, which can kill you.
Oh yeah, a cat scratch can give you cat scratch fever. You can get a fever from it. Yeah. Not to mention other things. Because look at rabies. Rabies is not a type of poisoning in some ways, the way you look at it that way. It poisons an animal's system, their blood and their saliva and everything. This stuff is very infectious. And that's why it's another thing you have to be careful of when you're out in the woods. You run up on supposedly rabid animal. Like if you see a bat out in daytime, there's definitely something wrong with that bat. You know what I'm saying? Raccoons can be the same way. Yeah, I mean, they're not supposed to be out there. There's something going on. I remember that when I was a kid one time, we actually caught a bat like that that was hanging on a tree in the middle of the day. And it was definitely something wrong with that bat, you know. Probably had rabies or something. So if something doesn't act right, you have to be very cautious around it. There's a reason for it, acting that way. We were talking about that. I was talking about that with my good friend Kenny Starfox the other night about, animals. Animals like people, they have a bad day sometimes. You just hope you don't run into that bear on his bad day.
They'll snap and bite you.
Yeah. Absolutely. They can not be feeling good too and take it out on you if you don't watch out. But you don't want to run into a bear on his bad day.
So I got some pictures. I got some pictures of some household items that people may or may not have had in their house at one time or another. If you want to go through those.
Mm-hmm. Well, I told you about that. My neighbor who foolishly, unfortunately, mixed Clorox and ammonia and liked to burn her lungs out. She had to have treatments after that. She never was right after that. It really messed her up. So be very cautious with stuff like that, folks, because the very gas can be poisonous. That comes off of this stuff, And there was a lot of poison gas used in World War I. Remember that? In the trenches.
Yeah, mustard gas.
Yeah, there were gas with mustard gas and all that kind of stuff. But that was, germ warfare is what it was, basically, Chemical warfare.
Well, shall we get in these pictures a little bit, Dennis, and go from there, or what do you want to do?
All right. You got some interesting things to talk about. Tell everybody about the books, huh?
Yeah, so I found this totally by accident. Didn't even think about it. I collect old books, and I have a few. These are not my books, by the way. This is just a picture for illustration, but I have some books that have this green color. And we talked about this green color earlier, and it comes from arsenic. So there's quite a few famous books that are out in print from the 1800s that have arsenic in the bindings and on the inside paintings. Here's one from the Crystal Palace that was passed out in a high production book in the 1800s.
I tell you what, that'd be another reason to handle these old books with gloves, right?
Absolutely.
I have a lot of old books in my collection. I have some dating back to Civil War, before pre-Civil War. As a matter of fact, I've got one that's, I think, 1858. But unfortunately, none of them are colored like this. But I heard about this years ago. And it also ties into, when you think about it, a lot of the mercury poisoning that went on back in those days. Mercury and all, and some of these other, chemicals that got into certain things that they did. They didn't realize what some of this stuff would do to you.
Right. Absolutely. And if you live in a Victorian house, chances are, if you have any kind of green wallpaper, you will have arsenic in these wallpaper colorings.
And another bad thing, if you were removing that kind of wallpaper, and the paste behind it turns to dust, and you breathe that stuff.
Right.
You could get in bad trouble really quickly.
So this is just an example out of a medical textbook on if you get that green arsenic from the books or wallpaper on your hands, it can cause lesions and not a very good thing. Get in your bloodstream, and you can see it erodes the skin, and not a very good thing if you have an overconcentrate of arsenic that touches your skin or gets into your body.
It kind of discolors your skin, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, you'll get a green tint to you.
Black looking, kind of dark.
Yep, it'll be like a green, obviously from the wear off of the books or wallpaper or whatever. Then it'll start going as it sets into your skin, almost like rigor mortis. It'll start turning black.
That's not good.
And so this wallpaper books, is from Paris green, Vienna green, Schwarzenfurt green is he is the one that first introduced it to the paint or the dye was Schwarzenfurt. They were for the publishers. So it goes by several different names.
By the way, folks, green is a color for magic. Green and blue. And green is supposed to be the most powerful color of magic. But here's something, Gerald. That sounds very much like gangrene setting in on you,
Yeah, pretty much. That's basically what they probably misdiagnosed some things from arsenic is that.
Mm-hmm.
So true. Household items would have arsenic in it. Here's Sherwin-Williams Paris green paint. It had arsenic to make the green color.
Especially when you go into some of these older houses, or maybe even some antiques painted with that kind of stuff, flaking off on you and all that, and you're handling it with your hands. I'm going to tell you something, folks. If you're in the habit of putting your fingers in your mouth and messing around with your nose a lot and doing this stuff, don't do that, because that is very unhealthy. No matter which way, depending on germs or something like this that Gerald's talking about, you could easily poison yourself, okay? It's a good idea, especially in the world nowadays, especially with all these germs and diseases that are out there. Keep your hands out of your mouth,
right,
away from any kind of orifices in your body, okay? That includes your eyes, your nose, and other things, okay? So be very careful where you put your hands. My mother, I don't know about your mother. My mother taught me from day one when I was very young, your hands are poisonous.
Yep. You always had to wash them and make sure they were clean, and definitely keep them out of your mouth and ears and nose and
eyes, everything.
Yeah. So here's a paint swatch of all the different colors of green and going into different offsets of the kind of light blue greens and stuff that all had arsenic in it at the time. So this wasn't a bright green, so you had to pay attention to these other colors too, because they mixed them.
And once upon a time, men carried, and women too, carried handkerchiefs of these kind of things. It's always good to have one. If you need to handle a doorknob or whatever the situation. It's a good idea to carry something like that to this day. But a lot of people got out doing that. Especially with the advent of tissue papers and all. That they use for that. That's okay, good. It's got its point. But you ought to have, a man ought to have a handkerchief in his backpack, and a woman needs one in her purse or with her, or stuck up in her sleeve, or whatever the situation. Because those things can be very important nowadays that you need to realize. I mean, I've had to go in some bathrooms in some pretty freaky places when I was in law enforcement and all that, and I always carried a handkerchief with me for these things. And I always had a pair of gloves with me too, for that matter, It doesn't take out much room for you to pack a pair of rubber gloves, okay, or anything like that. It's a good idea nowadays,
Yep. And for anybody that grew up on a farm or out in the hills, you surely knew about a lye soap being used, which also had chemicals in it that basically wasn't very good for you. It dried out your skin really bad, and it did help clean things up, but there definitely was a lye poisoning at one time because of the chemicals used.
That's what Granny on the Clampets always talking
about. Yeah, the Beverly Hillbillies always made lye soap.
Lye soap, yeah.
I have never had lye soap. I know my grandma's and that had lye soap, but I had never had used it.
You had to have pretty tough skin with that. When you're toughened your skin up, I guess.
Yep.
Bigfoot Dwarf says, "Don't curse around, Granny." Well, what my favorite saying about that Bigfoot Dwarf: "Don't bend over in the garden, Granny, because them taters got eyes."
So here's an opium bottle that doctors would subscribe to you for for stress or lack of sleep or dietary functions, all kinds of stuff. So this was opium, even though it was kind of diluted, but it was diluted with alcohol. So you can get, and then eventually it became over the shelf opium you could get, but this was doctors like
you ever drank any absinthe, Gerald?
I got that coming up too on some slides. I've never drank absinthe.
That stuff's rough, man. I took a swallow of some of that one time. That was all it did for me. That stuff would take you out of here if you're not careful with it. And you have to pour it over a cube of sugar, in order
yeah. Yep. So if anybody ever watched
but absinthe used to be served in opium dens,
Yeah. Yep. That was a big popular drink for its time. So here's laudanum, and if you've ever watched the Kurt Russell OK Corral movie, his wife drank laudanum all the time, and so that's the same thing as opium. It's a derivative, and that
it was used for medicinal purposes, especially back in the old West. It was called landrum. Remember that?
Yep.
It was a mixture of alcohol and opium, actually. That stuff was rough too, and it was highly addictive as well, by the way, just like morphine. And there, to this day, there's a whole family of drugs derived from morphine, still in use.
Still is, yep, absolutely.
It's nothing of the past. It's going on right now. It's still used.
So here's strychnine, which we know as rat killer, but they used it for medicine and for all kinds of ailments and stuff. But eventually strychnine became illegal, only legal for poisons for animals and stuff, and it had to be labeled as such. And even the snake handler churches, not only do they like handling snakes, but they say they can drink strychnine and be okay.
A lot of people got rid of two-legged rats that way, didn't they? One of those strychnine in the coffee.
Then here's a good one for you. Here's satanic liniment. So if you want to, I never have either till I was doing my rabbit hole diving, and it's for external use only. So I'm not sure what you would use this for other than aches and pains, but I'm sure if you want to call on the devil and use some satanic liniment, there might be some consequences of using it, but I don't know.
Well, it's that red devil eye. Remember that?
Yep.
They called it that for a reason, isn't it? You mess around with it too much, you might end up meeting the devil personally.
So here's 666 cold medicine that you could get back in the 1800s, early 1900s for nasal congestion. If you wanted to do some 666 cold medicine. So here's good for malaria and head chest and chest colds, headaches, minor burns, cuts, and sores.
Good for all around everything, right?
Yeah, liquids. You can get it in liquid form, tablets, salve, nose drops. I mean, 666 comes in a lot of different stuff.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'll just be very hesitant about taking something with 666.
Let alone a bottle with a devil on the front of it.
I would look askance at that, as they say.
So here's a popular perfume that had opium, pure opium mixed in with the fragrance.
Ooh, that can get you a date in a hurry, right?
So this would come from France, and it was in the 1800s. So if you can imagine being in a saloon as a saloon gal, and you put a little opium perfume on your neck or whatever, and you got a cowboy coming up and smelling your neck or kissing you on your neck, guess what that's going to do to that guy?
Definitely keep the girls coming back, right?
He might end up being a little doped up a little bit and easy to get whiskey and buy and money from him if he gets a little opium ingested in his bloodstream by smelling a pretty girl or kissing on her neck.
They did just something about her, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Every time I see her, I don't know what happens.
I tell you what, here's the thing about all this, Gerald. I'll let you continue, but I'm just going to put this in. Nobody really was monitoring this kind of stuff. They just put out whatever they wanted to. There was no, USDA looking at all this, nothing, you could just buy anything at the apothecary.
Yeah, we had to trust the manufacturers or doctors, whoever, and that they were telling us the truth, that it wasn't harmful, and they just didn't do tests. They just thought, well, this won't hurt you. It'll be all right.
And nowadays, you got to tell people not to forget to take the baby out of the jumper before you watch it. There you go.
So this next one, you had already brought it up, but we'll show it anyway.
Blue-eyed Bandit said all the girls get prettier at closing time. Yeah, they do.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the good old-fashioned Coca-Cola when it first came out.
Oh, yeah. Like I said earlier, that was originally a cough syrup made with cocaine, right? Coca-Cola.
Yeah, the doctor or the guy that developed it, eventually figured out that once he got it into the soda shops or the places where they sold beverages that people were starting to feel better. Well, no wonder if it had cocaine in it, maybe. So if you look at this chart, 1886, it had 9 milligrams of cocaine per glass. 1888, it had a different version of Coke, and it had 1/10 of the amount. 1903, Coke stopped using the fresh coca leaves, reducing the amount of cocaine, but it still had some that leaked into it. And it was finally until 1929 that they took all the traces of cocaine out of Coke. So they had a good run with Coke in it for quite a while.
A lot of people don't know this, Cheryl, but Sherlock Holmes actually took cocaine, and he took what was called a 7% solution. That was just the right amount to, get you feeling good, kind of happy, And if you stuck to the 7%, you didn't have a problem with overdosing on it or anything. But yet, when his mind could not work on a problem, he couldn't stand it, so he had to take that 7% solution, supposedly. I think Doyle eventually wrote that out because a lot of people objected to that, drug use.
Yep.
If you go back to the original Basil Rathbone movie of The Hound of the Baskervilles, you will hear that at the very end of the movie. You need to play that on your channel sometime. It's I love it. It's one of my favorite movies. And he says that at the end, he solves the mystery and everything and starts out of the room. He says, Watson, the needle.
Yep.
Yeah. And they actually, for a long time, Hollywood cut that out of that movie. And that's why they put it at the very end, the very last piece of dialogue. So it could be cut out.
Wow.
A lot of people would object to that. Drug use,
Yeah, well, I'm going to play some Sherlock Holmes eventually, but there's so many good movies out there to play, and we got a couple this weekend that are really good.
You can overdose on any drug, Monica, but it depends on what you also combine it with sometimes. That's the problem. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Gerald. What were you saying?
No, that's all right. I was just going to continue with the movies that this weekend we got Friday and Saturday with some really good movies, and since Sunday is Easter, I think we're going to do a special edition of movie night and play The Passion and maybe another movie along with it.
That's great. I'll definitely be tuning into that. Get into the Eastern mode there. There'd be some great movies. Absolutely. Well, what all you gonna play?
We have some new movies. Since you guys I'd already been thinking about it, but since you guys brought up robots and clones and all that today, and we're going to be playing Westworld this weekend, the original 1973
Oh,
Westworld.
oh yeah, the original Westworld. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
so we
did
got
make
that
some
going
remakes.
on.
They did make some remakes, but they never as good as the original.
No, you can't beat Yul Brynner.
No, no, he was great. He was Russian, you know that.
Yeah, I like him in The King and I love that movie, but that's not really a creepy movie, so we'll stick with Westworld.
Said Ray Charles was a heroin addict. He was blind, but he was able to find everything kind of crazy. Yeah, a lot of people had that problem. You know, they got hooked on these things. Definitely. I think Billie Holiday was another one that was hooked on some kind of drug or something.
Well,
List
you
goes
get
on
in
and
that.
on. You look at John Belushi. That's what got him unalive. Get him.
Yep. You get that celebrity status, whether you're a musician or movie star or whatever, that becomes readily available, and it ran rampant for years and years and probably still does.
Joanne wants to know what time that's going to be on Rumble.
We've been doing it Fridays and Saturdays at 10 p.m. Central. And it goes to almost sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning. We play usually 3 or 4 hours of TV shows and a movie.
Sounds great. We'll talk about that again before we close the show out and give everybody a link to it. But check it out because Gerald has some great stuff on there, and it's not like it's a lot of this trash you see on there, trashy Hollywood stuff they do now. I was watching it, which would have been a very good movie the other night. Um, but if they ever bleep it out on television, you wouldn't know what the dialogue was.
Right.
They'd have to bleep it out so much you wouldn't know what they were saying. But that's the way they make everything in Hollywood. If it's one continuously big tribe of cuss words, that's about it.
Yeah. So we've been sticking to the old classics, the ones that I grew up watching and loving, whether they're from the 40s, 50s, 60s, some 70s, and we just now added X-Files. So we're going through the series of X-Files also. So if you like X-Files, we're on like episode 6.
Absolutely. Monica says addiction doesn't discriminate. Oh no, it's for everybody. No matter what the addiction may be, whether it's drugs, whether it's sex, whether it's pornography, whether it's gambling,
Soda,
goes on and on and on. And what is
chocolate.
alcohol? We said that before, Gerald. Alcohol is nothing but a liquid drug. That's all it is.
Right. I mean, whatever it is, like you said, smoking, drinking, it could be food, it could be snacking, it could be my soda. I mean, I drink soda all the time. That could be my addiction. I don't know.
Yeah, that's my vice too. I always said, always just joke, said my only vice is loyalty. Okay. If you want to call that a vice. But I have some of it, that's what we've talked about before, and we'll get into that a little bit here. Witchcraft, and that's what a lot of stuff is tied to, folks. Witchcraft. Witchcraft is the understanding of what herbs, plants, and certain remedies and mixtures will do to you, or do for you, or do it against you, whatever the situation is. These people began as root doctors and granny witches and hoodoo men, as they used to call them. Now, and then they turn to the darkness, to the dark arts. And a lot of this stuff is tied into that arsenic, nightshade, belladonna, the whole works. Very deadly stuff. Mandrake, the list goes on and on. The stuff that they use in their mixtures and spells and incantations and all that stuff. This is directly tied in with witchcraft and very dark stuff. So that's why, Gerald and I were talking about the other day. You have to be very careful what you take from people, folks. Don't take just anything somebody reaches out and hands it to you. You could be taking something you definitely do not want to have. And that's
Right.
why I was telling Gerald when I were talking about this before the show. That's why your mama told you never take stuff from strangers. It was afraid they were gonna snatch you or anything. You can get some bad stuff from some people, okay? And there are people out there that love to do that, and they can cast these spells and pass this poison on to you without you knowing it. So be careful of what foods you eat. And Gerald and I were talking about women being given roofies, as we used to call them, to knock them out and rape them. That was that part of the date rape thing.
Yep.
That's still going on. Never leave your drink on the table. Take it with you. Watch your food. Okay, it's very easy to slip something in food or drink and nobody's watching. So we have to be very cautious about a lot of these things and understand, not to put ourselves in these situations.
Absolutely. And Monica was talking about herbalist these days doesn't necessarily mean you're into witchcraft. And you're absolutely right. I mean, back in the day, though, whether it was medieval time, Victorian time, if you knew these things, you kind of got labeled as being a witch or portraying in the dark magic. And some spells, have herbs listed. We have books that from those time periods that have herbs listed in these spells to use. But these days, a lot of people are going natural and using home remedies for whatever, toothpaste, deodorant, common colds, whatever. I mean, that doesn't mean grandma that put a mustard pack on your chest was a witch.
Oh, yeah. There were a lot of things, like I said earlier, I would trust the medicine people before I would trust some of the doctors. Definitely. And a lot of these herbs and plants were given to us by a creator for these things. Definitely, without a doubt. God wanted us to have some of this stuff for not just for food, for our own health. That's got a lot to do with that. Yeah, absolutely. If you
Yep.
eat healthy, you will be healthy. That's what you get out of it. But if you eat trash, you will be what, Gerald?
Yep. Trash.
That's the way it goes. You are what you eat.
That's
What goes
right.
in, what comes out. Okay. And you got to remember that, especially when it comes to that. And of course, we're all guilty of not eating healthy because it's convenient not to.
Right.
Somebody said the other day, and they do this deliberately. They really jack prices up on the healthy food. You ever notice that?
Absolutely. There's a reason for
Yeah, they
that.
really jack. Yeah, they know what they're doing. Yeah, they don't want you to eat healthy. And
Yeah.
if you
I
do,
mean,
you have to pay for it, buddy.
it's like spending $3 to $4 for a bottle of water, but you can get a soda for 99 cents.
There you go. Yeah. You're still looking at water, but it's kind of unhealthy water. Yeah. But you got to wonder where some of this water comes from. It's so cold, and it's just like we were talking about earlier. The government didn't have any regulation back then, and there's a lot of stuff getting under the radar nowadays too. There's a lot of stuff that our government's not looking at. They should be looking at. Skin, putting even just water. There's no regulation on a lot of that. Do they know where some of this water is really coming from? They're selling it as spring water out of somebody's tap.
Right.
Know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you don't know what to drink or eat anymore, because of that. I don't know. We have to be very careful. We have to be careful.
My next picture is a very popular gift that a lot of boys and some girls probably got as Christmas gifts growing up. If anybody ever got a chemistry set or anything like that, but this was an atomic energy lab from the Gilbert company, and it had real radium in it.
That's wild.
It had real radioactive samples that you can do projects in science.
Well, I have a little lab over here that, I have tested some things with other. I never got too deep into chemistry, though. But let me say this about chemistry. Where did it begin? It began with who, Gerald? The alchemist.
Yeah, Merlin, the magician, was an alchemist.
It began with the alchemists, and they were basically looking for the elixir of life and to turn base metals into gold. But then there you had some dark alchemists, though. You had this regular alchemist, and then you had some dark alchemists. They were looking at transmuting things and turning things into other things, like turning people into frogs or whatever the situation. They were doing the alchemy for bad stuff, okay, for evil stuff. Most of alchemy and was used for trying to get rich quick. That was the main goal, or so live forever, one or the other, or both.
So these science kits had alpha, beta, gamma radioactive radium in there for experiments, and you could reorder them because they had a shelf life. They only lasted so many years or whatever, and so they actually had an order blank that you can send this in and get refills of your radium through the mail.
Well, I got to make a confession here, Joe. I do have some radium here.
Oh,
Okay. I got a little small sample of radium that I use to test my Geiger counter with, but I keep it in a lead envelope. Okay. For safety purposes. But it's just a small amount used to test, radiation.
right, right. I mean, that's the way it was for us in a nuclear plant when I was a nuclear guard there.
Yeah.
That we would have little pieces of radium to make sure that your test devices were working properly.
Right? You have a badge.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We had to go in there and write down our levels every day, and they had to test the equipment. And well, the only way to test the equipment is to expose it, with a medic or a sample, a test sample to know if it's registering right.
What color was your badge? We had badges in the hospital. If they turned red, you had a problem.
I never had one turn a color, so I don't know. But we also had the little metal tubes that you look into it, and it had a little bar on it, and they would register how many.
Oh yeah.
And we could only go so high for a certain amount of time period that we were on shift, and we had to write those numbers down. Plus, we had the badge that would turn a color, like you said. But mine never turned a color. So, but I do have pictures from inside the containment chamber where the radium and the bars were.
From the hospital there, Joe.
Let me take this down so you'll be bigger.
Oh yeah.
I think upstairs.
Yeah.
Upstairs in my curio cabinet, I think I still have my my badge meter and the little test monitor that you'd wear, and you'd zero it out after every shift after you wrote down the amount you got for your 8 hours or 10-hour shift, whatever you worked.
Yeah, they kept a very meticulous record on that, huh?
They didn't really care, I don't think. But if something happened, they wanted to.
They did that for one reason. It wasn't for you. They did that to cover their own butts. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. That's why I said I don't think they really cared, but they wanted a record in case something did happen.
Let's look at the real motivation here, right? The real motivation.
So here's a picture of your absinthe. If you go in, this drink actually took over France. France was the #1 drink was wine, and absinthe took over wine production and drinkers. And lobbyists finally got together. Believe it or not, with the women. Huh?
You got to be very careful how you analyze.
So the wine industry actually got together with the women's group to stop alcohol, and teamed up with them to get this absinthe to become illegal. That's the only way they got it out of to make it illegal in all of Europe and even the United States.
I used to have to go in the alcohol room of the hospital, and it was all right off the pharmacy. They had 55-gallon drums of 200 proof alcohol in there. Okay. You could not stay in there without a respirator. You would get high as a cat in a minute. I mean, it was just the fumes. Okay.
Yep.
You had to be nobody wanted to stay in there very long. Okay, you had to do your job and get out. But I've had to go in there a lot of times, and you had to put on a respirator definitely because you'd be feeling mighty fine the rest of the day if you know what I mean.
Yep. So we have happy hour, that's a general term for us, but over in France they had green hour. So for business lunches and after work, people would go in there and get absinthe. They get those and they already mentioned it in chat. Joe Organ did. It was called the Green Fairy. So you had that specialized spoon or utensil that had the slots in it, and you had the sugar cube, and you'd set it on fire, and it dripped down into your drink. That's
Yep.
how you got the sweetness into the drink.
Yeah, that's how you gave it a better taste because it's very bitter.
Yep. And then if you were at home, you could use a spoon and light your sugar cube and kind of drip it off of the side of the spoon like it's showing. So if you were drinking it at home, and it did become publicly used at home, not just the bars.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until 2007, I think they said, that absinthe wasn't legalized in the United States till then.
Yeah, I know it was illegal. Yeah, that didn't stop them from having it.
No.
Oh no.
So they say if you want to have a good absinthe, you got to have grande wormwood. And then you got green anise, sweet fennel. But the Roman wormwood or the grande wormwood is the key ingredient to having a good absinthe.
Wormwood's another very poisonous plant and very bitter. It's supposed to be one of the most bitter plants in nature, wormwood.
Yep.
And it's used a lot in witchcraft, definitely. Our discussion, chat room's going on about smoking. Let me say this about smoking, okay? And believe me, I was a smoker for a long time. This vaping that's going on now, it's no better. It's just you're just trading one habit for another. Both of them is going to badly affect you sooner or later. In that respect. I think the vaping really is worse on your lungs than the smoking. By the way, it really gums your lungs up and can cause you some very bad problems.
Well, there is chemicals in the tobacco and stuff for smoking, but vapes have a way different chemical base, and some of them are really bad.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, some of and they don't even know what some of this stuff in the vaping is, and what it will do to you. It's not good, and that's very much like pot smoking. One pot, one weed, okay, one roach or whatever name you want to call it. It's the equivalent of one pack of cigarettes almost on your lungs, okay. In that respect, that's good. That's not good. Okay, you're doing something very unhealthy. That's just like drinking to excess or whatever the situation is. You abuse this stuff.
Right.
You're going to run into a problem. That even goes with good medicine, much less bad stuff.
Then if you were lucky enough to be the person that never had a problem your whole life where it was just marijuana with very little chemicals laced into it, but if you were one of the people that got the fentanyl or the cocaine or acid or whatever else was laced into that, or even strychnine, there could be poisons straight up in your mixture. You don't know where you never knew where it was coming from when you got off the street.
Oh yeah. And I've been in some situations where we ran into white powder and stuff on counters and stuff like that. We didn't know what it was, could be fentanyl, could be something else, and luckily it turned out to be starch. But they were using that. By the way, they use starch in pill making machines. Okay,
right?
These pressers that they have, to make pills with.
Yep.
They use starch to a certain degree in that.
Yeah, you got to have a binder.
Drug manufacturing,
Yep, you got to have a binder or something. Just like in any home remedies or mixtures, you got to even cooking recipes. You got to have a binder, something that makes all the stuff stick together.
Oh yeah. That's very dangerous stuff. Fentanyl. I mean, one minute little bit of that substance can kill you. Okay,
right.
And then they lacing it. They lace it in marijuana and other things. You
That's the
don't know
number
what
one
you're
drug
buying.
on the
Real
street right
people,
now.
you know.
Yep, fentanyl is the number one killer, the number one drug on the street right now, where you have all these people they're basically turning into zombies. If you ever watch any of those videos of the towns where
Put
the
it in everything, Joe. They put it in heroin. They put it in cocaine. They put it in marijuana. The list goes on and on. They even put it in some OxyContin pills that they make. Okay. You run the risk of, and I don't care what it is you're taking, of overdosing very quickly with this stuff, and it can unalive you very fast.
right.
Is it worth it? Yeah. Is it really worth it to put yourself in that kind of a dangerous situation? And Joanne said the FDA found asbestos in certain drugs from overseas. Yeah, they have no regulations over there. We have very little here, but they have none in China. I would not. Hey, let me tell you something, folks. I had a friend. He actually bought some dog treats that were made in China. It's like they killed his dog.
Yep.
Okay, you don't know what you're buying in places like that. You better be very, very, very exclusive in what you're doing here.
Well,
If you
remember
don't want to
the
kill your dog,
McDonald's.
Your children or anything. I mean, come on.
Remember the McDonald's Happy Meal callback, because the Chinese were making the toys that had chemicals and lead in the paint in the little plastic toys, and the children were chewing on it and digesting it.
So China down in Mexico making those pills exact molds for that. Yeah. And I'm gonna tell you something. I'm not believe me, folks, there's not a racist bone in my body, okay? I think we're all God's children. I don't care what where you come from, what you look like, what color you are, whatever the situation, okay? But there are some bad things coming out of Mexico. And I'm not saying it's not because of the way the people live, it's because of some of these regulations or the lack of the regulations and the things that they do and the corruption that is in control of that country, okay? You want to be very cautious at what you take out of Mexico. You got a lot of E. coli coming in on this stuff. You got a lot of things going on that you do not want to mess with. Trust me. Be very cautious. If it says made in Mexico, watch out. Okay. And
Yep.
it's not only Mexico. It can be other places. It can be China. It can be France for that matter. Be very, very careful what you put into your body and what you deal with and what you put your hands on, You don't know what you're dealing with.
Right. In a lot of countries, they don't care what they export. I mean, that's going somewhere else. It's not their problem.
Yeah. Exactly right. It's all about making the money. They don't care if you die as long as they make the money off of you. They don't care.
Right. So my next picture is a very close one to me. I really love this story, and it's a sad story, but I just love this story because my aunt actually worked in one of these factories. So this is the Radium Girls. If you know the history behind the Radium Girls and West Clocks. The Radium Girls painted all these hour hands and minute hands and the numbers with radium paint.
Mm-hmm.
And my aunt worked.
The old time Geiger counters used to pick those watches.
Yeah, my aunt worked in West Clocks here in LaSalle, Illinois, and but they didn't have radium paint when she was there, obviously. But this was early way back that they did have radium in it.
Mm-hmm.
So these girls, these women, painted these clock hands by hand.
To this day, that a lot of pawn shops look for those.
Oh yeah, I have West Clocks. We have radium West Clock dials in our house and our clocks, and my uncle collected clocks. So we have Big Bens and all those. But these women were painting these dials, and they would take the paint brushes and put it in their mouth and wet the tip so they would get the radium in their mouth. They would paint their lips with their radium because it glue in the dark. So when they go out,
cancer and throat cancer from that, right?
Oh, it went through their whole body. It made their bones look like Swiss cheese. It was brittle. It had holes in their bones, and it just they cracked and died of cancer, but they would paint their eyelids, they would paint their lips, they'd paint their teeth with this because the company was telling them it was harmless and it was going out to the consumer. So there couldn't be anything wrong with it. So they did not have any protections or any regulations on this paint whatsoever.
And they got away with it.
And if you go to that town I was telling you about here in Illinois, the building burnt down eventually, finally, after all those years. And part of it, they paved it over, and there's a farmer's market that they have on top of it. And guess what? Over that asphalt, if you take a Geiger counter, you can still pick up radioactivity underneath that asphalt.
It never goes away. That's like what happened in Chernobyl. You know, the iron foot, the elephant foot they got there, you know, where it melted. And they say it will be highly rare. You can't stay around it for like any more than 5 minutes. It will kill you. Okay. And that's with a radiation suit on. Okay, folks. And that's going to be that way for probably the next 100, 200, or 300,000 years.
Yeah. So PBS did a great special, a great documentary on the radium girls, and they actually got a lot of them when they were alive and talked to them, and their family talked about what their parents or mother went through or aunts went through when they got this poisoning, and they did a history from the very beginning to the end on when they regulated radium paint. Very good special.
Mm-hmm. You know, there was a lot of manufacturing went on like that, though, Gerald, that they didn't regulate. Big business got the money out of it. They didn't really care what happened to the employees and all that. We had a lot of things like that in the South happening with the cotton mills and all that. They actually shot and killed people. They tried to have unions and cotton mills. There's a place not too far from where I'm at right now. They have a memorial there for several people that were killed by the people that own these mills because they wanted a union. You had a lot of big businesses that took advantage of their employees over these things in many, many ways. And look at the cotton mills, Gerald. They were communism to a certain extent. You worked in the mill. They gave you mill money that you spent where? In the mill store.
Yep.
They got all their money back. What were you working for? Nothing. You were a slave.
Yep. Working for the company store.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know, the coal, it didn't matter what industry you're in, with coal mining or any of those plantations, it didn't matter.
Oh, yeah. A lot of slavery went on even after the Civil War. Okay. Look at the coal mines and all this other stuff that went on. It was, and big business ran it that way. I've actually seen pictures, you know, they talk about white privilege and all that. I've seen pictures of little 8-year-old children that had to work shucking oysters on the coast of South Carolina all their whole life. They didn't have a childhood. They had to shuck all oysters from dawn to dusk.
Yep.
And then some. You ought to see them. I mean, this is, you know, you don't hear about this.
Right.
Nobody talks about it.
Even the islanders, you know, fishing, the canneries, the sponge divers. I mean, it's all horrible industry for a lot of it. It was for a long, long time.
That was child labor back in those days, you know.
The wool mill, you know, for clothing.
They passed laws eventually that try to stamp a lot of that. But look, it still goes on in China. Where do you think most of the people disappear in China too? Concentration camps where they work like slaves for this stuff.
Right.
They sew and they do all this other stuff. You know, they're not out there busting rocks and making gravel. Okay. They are in there dealing in these sweatshops and all this stuff. They're working for China.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't love, I'm going to rephrase that. I don't love it. It's, but I kind of giggle once in a while when I hear of these celebrities pushing their merchandise or their logos or whatever it is. And it turns out it's made in a sweatshop in China where they, you know, they talk about about humanity and all this and care about the environment, but then all their products comes from places that don't have those same ideology.
Some of these children, Gerald, are learning to thread sewing machines before they can hardly talk.
Right. They're born into it.
Yeah.
The children get taken with the mothers to the place where they sew or craft or whatever in these China workshops. And then pretty soon the kids are old enough to start doing it themselves.
And guess what? Guess what? The sports in this country is deep into this stuff. You know, the NBA, the football league, and the baseball league. They're all deep into the merchandising of this stuff. They're in bed with China on this stuff. Where do you think it's coming from? They don't want to talk about that though. You know, such that.
Absolutely. And that was the thing about the West Clocks factory. You know, the girls thought it was safe because they were told it was safe. Their supervisors thought it was safe because that's what they were told. And it just went all the way up the chain until you got to the very top. And even they denied it, you know, how poisonous it was. And, you know, it was basically between the very top people of the company and the scientists probably knew and lied about it, but everybody else below just thought it was harmless. So they really didn't. They really felt bad once they found out that they were having their people getting poisoned by doing this when they were telling them it was harmless all these years, because they really honestly didn't know, some of the people.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, another thing, where do you think all these North Korean troops that are fighting in Ukraine come from? They come from a lot of these concentration camps, okay?
Yeah.
That's where they come from. They were dissidents, and they put them on the front line as cannon fodder, okay? That's basically what it is. So, and, you know, I remember hearing about one North Korean girl whose father tried to help her escape North Korea and went over across the border into China or somewhere like that. And they captured him, and the last time she ever saw him, he was headed for one of those camps where he probably died. They will work you to death in those camps. And that's literally, okay.
Yeah, if you had a choice between staying in prison or a concentration camp or going to war, and you may earn your freedom or you might just end up dying, and it's, you know, it still would be relief from the concentration camp.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. They're not, like I say, they're not busting rocks. They're working for the government. They're working for the man, definitely. And here's another thing, you know. A lot of people go missing in this country. We've talked about this with Jessica before on her show and other shows as well. Where are some of these people going? They're going into a lot of sex, you know, business. They're going into that. But where some of them are definitely going into slavery on these things. And for all we know, there could be a lot of these, you know, shops around, especially in Mexico, places like that that we don't know about. And they're being sent there or some of these other places. So it's not just about the sex. It's other things too. Some of these people getting jobs in other rich people's homes or cleaning pools or whatever the situation is.
Right.
They're like the Irish were when they first came to this country. They were indentured servants. It's just another fancy name for slave, okay?
It's been in every civilization, whether it's the Egyptian, the Romans. I mean, even here in the U.S., when you go out to the East Coast or the Barbary Coast, you got shanghaied because sailors or mariners needed men, you know, so they would drug you or whatever, and pretty soon you'd wake up and you're on a ship out in the middle of the ocean. What are you going to do?
Yeah. You were stuck, buddy. That was it. Absolutely. And you know, a lot of people foolishly say today, oh, there is no such thing as slavery anymore. That's a bunch of bull. There's more slavery now in this world than there ever has been. And somebody has always been somebody else's slave. Nobody's got a moratorium on it, folks. Everybody at one time or another. White people got sold into slavery to the Arabs, and black people got sold to the Arabs. Arabs used to buy slaves more than anybody else did, okay? Everybody at one time or another has been somebody's slave. You know, and if one group of people is going to get compensation for that, everybody needs to get compensation for it. Because everybody at one time or another has been slaves. We are descended from slaves. But if you go back into your family history, eventually, sooner or later, you're going to run into a slave.
Or at the very least, a lot of times when they came over to the U.S., whether it was the Irish or the Chinese or whatever group you were, whatever nationality, you were sold basically to work into those sweatshops, those factories, and your children were. So you were slaves working when you came over here for your freedom. You were trapped.
Oh yeah, they were waiting for you, buddy. They were just waiting for you to get off the boat. Especially if you were Chinese, you helped build the railroads and situations like that. I mean, it was a trap. Get free labor cheap. Yeah.
Yep. And then it's like everything else. And I've felt this myself. You're in a job, you get comfortable, you'd like to do better, you'd like to get more pay, better insurance, but you just don't want to leave. It's kind of like you're trapped in that job. It's like, well, I know what I have. I can't really go anywhere else. What do you do?
Absolutely. But always somebody was taking, like, I told you about those meal workers. You talked about the radium girls. Somebody was always getting it over somebody, and that's just the way they work. And that is one reason why they formed unions. Although I'm not a real big fan of unions, it's one reason why they were formed. And the other workers associations, Teamsters, and all those, they were formed for this because they were taking advantage of people. They still do. Look at McDonald's. McDonald's is nothing in many ways but like a sweatshop. Okay, that's about what it is. Unfortunately, it's dealing with food, but
Yep.
And look at everybody who works at McDonald's. Nobody wants to be there, folks. I don't want this. I hate it. And they let you know it. They don't pull any punches on it. Nobody wants to be there. That's why, and I was talking about this on Jessica's show today. Robots are in our future, whether you realize this or not. It's coming, folks. Okay, robots are coming. Okay, eventually they're going to probably replace us. If we're not real careful about it. But they're going to be doing the menial jobs that nobody wants to. They're going to be cleaning the bathrooms. They're going to be sewing the jackets. They're going to be flipping burgers at McDonald's. Okay, because nobody wants to do that.
Right. Have you seen the Kawasaki new robot for their motorcycles?
They got a Kawasaki horse. Have you seen that?
That's what I'm talking about. It's called the Colossal
robot horse. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's almost going to replace their motorcycle for off-roading. You can go out in the wilderness or go off-road.
It can walk up hills better than a real horse.
Yep, it says it has the stability of a goat on the side of a mountain.
Absolutely. That's in the future. That's what's coming.
That's today. Believe it or not.
Right now, I was reading that the other day. There's like 100,000 robots ready to go for certain things like this. Okay, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, just the beginning. 100,000. Think about that. That's a lot of robots, and they're ready to go into the workforce. That's 100,000 jobs gone. Because look at the size of the big factories. They're gonna say, hey, we can run a robot better than we can run you. We have to give you workers' comp if you get hurt. We have to, take your taxes out. We have to do this. We have to make a good place for you to eat your dinner at and all. They don't want to do that anymore. They want a robot. They can run 24/7 without any lights on in the factory.
Right now, it's like the robots that we had when I was in the automobile factory, where we had robots that were in dangerous places for install so workers wouldn't get hurt. And a lot of these robots are doing now is going to be replacing the employees that are even in those.
Look how much money McDonald's was saved not having to burn lights. Robots don't need lights to work in the dark, folks. Look at the money alone that they will save on electricity. It's going to be in their favor. It's always in their favor. A lot of people talk about, they're going to, tax the poor and they're going to give the rich a break. The rich always get a break. I don't care who's in power or who's doing what. That's just the way the rich work. Okay, that's the way they roll, and the poor don't. Okay, that's why it makes the rich, and why rich people think they're better than you are. They're smarter than you are. They get better medicine than you do. They get better medical facilities. They get everything. They eat better than you do. Money is what runs this world system, and we are all slaves to the world system, folks. That's the way it works. And you're going to see in a very near future, coming down the line, just how much of a slave you can really be. Just wait. It's coming. And we talk about this a lot in a lot of these programs. The government and all this stuff, they're not the only ones out there. There's a lot more driving this from the back, from the shadows, But let me say this. It's always going to be to their advantage. It's like playing against the house casino. Who always wins, Gerald?
They do.
Yeah.
The house.
And they got it fixed that way, folks.
The house always wins.
They got it fixed that way. They're going to win. They're going to, I can see it. I had a friend one time went to a casino. Hey, I want $100. Yeah, it took him $500 to do it, though. Who's winning there, folks?
Yeah,
he didn't win. The casino won.
You might have won your $600 or $700 that 30th time you've lost $2,000.
Yeah. The odds are always against you. Okay. What's that? They were saying from a movie I once watched. Said I've always wanted to fight a hopeless battle against incredible odds. That's the way it goes. That's it. That's what we're doing. We're fighting a hopeless battle against incredible odds. That's like so many people. They win $50 with the lottery and spend $500 to get that. Or how are you coming out on top of that? Not too good. Well, I won't have to worry about breaking their back from on the robot. Okay, hon. Well, actually, think about it'd be nice to have a robot horse. You don't have to feed him. You don't have to worry about a vet bill, maybe a mechanic every now and then. You come out cheaper. And that's what all this is geared for. Every bit of this, right, girl? It's cheap, cheap, cheap. They're not going to waste their profit on this. You understand? That's what it's all about. They're going to make a profit. They're not going to lose. That's like, I used to know people that could go in the store and steal you exactly what you wanted. They could go in and shop. You could tell them, say, oh, I want me a black leather jacket, and I tell them what they want. And they would steal that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. They still do this now. They never stopped, okay? They're probably better at it now than they were then. But they would always laugh about it. But who's really paying for that jacket? You are, because that company's not going to lose the money. They're going to, up the prices to pay for that jacket. They're not going to lose money. You do not have a business. Cheryl knows this. You don't have any kind of business if you lose money. You got to make money. And if somebody steals, you're going to make money. You're not going to take the hit on that. You're going to make other people pay for it. That's the way it works. Nobody's getting nothing for free here, okay? They might think they are. Somebody somewhere is paying for it. Look at all these people on welfare. Lazy, low down, sorry trash. That's what they are. They don't want to work. Nothing wrong with them. They just don't want to work. Who's paying for it? People like you and me, Joe, go into work and pay taxes. That's who's paying for it.
Should be able to write them off as dependents.
The government get the money. The government is not a profit-making thing. It's getting money from who? You and me.
Yep.
That's why every single one of those presidents, congressmen, vice president, representatives, every one of them work for you. They're supposed to. Working for you because you pay them.
And we know that's not happening.
I never ever want to hear one politician, I don't care who it is, say, hey, you work for me. You work for me. I pay you. You work for me. It ain't the other way around. But they don't believe that. Most of them don't believe that. So they're getting millions out of this stuff. How are they doing that? They're getting insider information. They're doing a lot of insider trading. They're making laws and stuff to whose benefit, not yours, but theirs. They're making money. They're getting rich off of this. You know what? Here's what I was telling somebody this the other day. When they first wrote the laws, bylaws, and constitution of this country, you were supposed to serve one term. I don't care what it was, except for the president. You were supposed to serve one term and go home. and you didn't get paid for it.
Yep, they volunteered their time and it was in between their normal job, whether you were a farmer or a printer or a mercantile guy. You went there on your off season or whatever. If you're a farmer, you went in between harvest and planting, and you served your duty to your country, and you went back home.
David Crockett had to leave Washington and go home and hunt so his family could have something to eat. That's what a congressman was back in the day. Okay, what happened?
Yep. So if we had term limits and we had,
listen, Gerald, every single one of them sitting on the chairs up there in Washington are millionaires. Does that tell you something?
Right.
And all of a sudden, they hate Teslas, but they were buying them like crazy. You know, where are they getting this stuff at? They are laughing at us behind our backs. Okay, I guarantee they are. We are slaves to their system. But that's exactly where they want us.
Yep.
Yep. But anyway, that is another kind of poison, is it not?
It is.
It is definitely another kind of poison. Yeah. Political poison.
Pick your poison, I guess.
Yep. But anyway, this has been a very good show. Got any more pictures of that? It?
Nope, that was it. The only thing I didn't say was the absinthe. You know, when it became illegal, they said that you could hallucinate or lose your mind, become crazy from drinking it. And there was one famous case in France where they blamed a husband for going out after work and drinking a bunch of absinthe and going home and killing his wife and child. And so they used that as a precedent to get it banned in France and the U.S.
Well, you know, some of this stuff was combined, of course, with opium and other things too, you know. That would definitely probably be on there. It might not have been abstinence alone. It might have been combined with something else. But, you know, any kind of drug like that has that reaction sometimes. It just depends. You know, what might not do that to you, might do that to me or so, or whatever the situation. You never know when you deal with drugs. You're in some very uncharted territory and what it might do. You know, like my mother used to say, when they give you a pill, they don't know whether it's going to kill you or cure you. They don't really know what it's going to do to you. You know, that's why the doctors will tell you, oh, now, if you do this, you start having a headache, get this or something, call me or something, you know, or quit taking it. They'll tell you that. Yeah. They don't know what it's going to do to you because everybody's different. You know, everybody's system is different.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why there's so many drugs on the market now, because if you have a reaction to one, they have another one as an alternate for you.
Well, we might have to do like... who was it? Plato drank the hemlock. You remember that?
Oh yeah, drink hemlock. Yeah,
hemlock. Yeah. They gave him a choice. You know, we can, you know, cut your head off. Something, or you just drink the hemlock. Or Jim Jones, you drink the Kool-Aid, right? Remember Jim Jones?
Yep.
Yeah. You drink the Kool-Aid. Let's not do that. They're probably trying to give us poison. Anyway, it's been a fascinating thing. There's definitely a lot of poison out there, folks. And, you know, here's one more poison we're going to look at before we close out. Poisonous people. Okay. There are a lot of people out there walking around on two legs that are poison. Okay, folks. Their very narcissistic attitudes will drive you crazy if they don't kill you. Okay. They'll put you somewhere, definitely. And we got to understand that some people like that are very negative people with outlooks that use and abuse people are just as bad as poison in a bottle, okay? In many ways, especially to your spirit, not just your body. And so we need to be very careful how we operate around those people or let those people in our lives or let those people use and abuse us. Unfortunately, you know, law enforcement, Gerald, I used to talk to women, their boyfriends and husbands would beat them up. I mean, beat them crap out of them, you know. And I would ask them, why do you let them do that? Why you stay in this relationship? Oh, I love him. That's not love, folks. Okay, that's drinking the poison. Okay, that's what it is. And yeah, let somebody do you that way. So let's not that is one poison we can control. You
You know,
know, we
there's
got one poison hitting us. We got plastic. We're turning slowly into plastic in this world. Okay, we
there's
really are.
some people in this world that you'd be better off drinking the poison straight out of the bottle than dealing with them your whole life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The poison comes in many different varieties and many different flavors and many different ways. And we need to keep his poison in our lives, whatever it may be, down to the barest minimum possible. We'll live better for it. Yeah, no matter which way it is, no matter if it's poisonous people, substances, chemicals, whatever the situation, certain foods, and stuff like that. We need to keep it to a minimum. We know it's poison. We need to be aware of it and beware of it.
That's right.
Yep. Well, this has been a great show. You
Yeah,
got any
that's great.
closing thoughts on this personal poison?
No, other than we always tell you, check your household items, make sure you know what you have, especially if you have small children or people visiting. That's why we have child locks on cabinets in the kitchen and the bathroom, so they don't get medications, they don't get household cleaners, because they all have chemicals. It might not be arsenic or strychnine or all that stuff, but there is dangerous chemicals still in our households.
There you go. Definitely. That's good words of good advice there, Gerald. And I tell you what, plants too, house plants that we bring into the houses and all that. We
Yep.
need to be very careful about that. A lot of them are very poisonous, especially to animals, pets, children that might put, some of these unknowingly in their mouths or something. So we need to be very aware of that. The best house plants in the world to me, Gerald, are made out of plastic. You don't have to water them.
Oh,
They do them, yeah.
I'll have enough plastic flowers on my grave, so I don't need any.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. But we need to be aware that about everything in this world, definitely, and be very careful how we deal with it and things in our lives, poisonous people, poisonous substance, whatever the situation. We need to be very careful how we deal with it and be aware. And I'm a werewolf, Gerald. Okay, and
you know,
I'm a werewolf. Yeah.
I shouldn't have to say this, but just as a disclaimer,
I get misquoted on that a lot. Okay, but
yeah.
Uh,
Should never have to say this, but just as a disclaimer, do not eat Tide Pods. Do not go up in the attic and eat cotton candy, and do not drink the green Kool-Aid that is better known as radiator fluid.
If it ain't your tongue, don't put it in your mouth.
It's not Mountain Dew, so don't drink radiator fluid.
Yeah.
No matter what TikTok or Facebook or whoever tells you it.
Radiator fluid, yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's kind of an adequate description. Yeah, definitely. It might work good in your radiator too. We'll have to try that sometime.
Might work.
Yeah, I heard candles and plug-ins. Yeah, some of this stuff that they sent you home with, Monica, definitely can be noxious stuff. Ooh. Here, we all want our homes to smell good, but there are natural ways to do that. You can bring in flowers or have floral printed scents that are put in. Just be very careful what you're putting in, because remember, that's your environment, and you got to breathe and live in that environment. And if it's not good for you, it's going to badly affect you, no matter how it goes. That's what we were talking about with this vaping and all the stuff that people do. That cannot be good for you. Okay, look at it for what it really is going on. And if something doesn't, look good, maybe it's not good. Use your sense, use your common sense, and understand that's your environment. And you got to live in it, and you are, to a certain extent, you are what your environment is, right, Drew?
Yep. Speaking of candles, they were making these all natural, good wax scented candles, and turns out that the wicks had lead in them and other chemicals. So as you were burning them, that was going into your air, and you were breathing that. It was supposed to be an all natural, healthy thing.
I think candles would be safer than some of this other stuff, to a certain extent. There wouldn't be so many. There's not that many chemicals in candles, I hope, depending on what you get. You'd have to sort of get more of the natural blended candles. Like beeswax candles or something like that. more organic type candles, put it that way.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating show, and I hope you all really enjoyed it. And you will be cautious out there and be aware of what's out there. Be careful, and we keep the poisons in our life down to a minimum. We'll be much better people for that. Absolutely, much healthier people. And we appreciate you all being here tonight. Don't forget, Gerald's got a store. Okay.
That's right.
Gerald has got a store. He's not taking personal checks, I don't think, but he's got a store. And he's got some merchandise on right now, as a matter of fact, don't you?
Absolutely. You can go to Midwest Night Watchers at printful.me and order some t-shirts or hats or drinkware. Or we have all of our logos, whether it's Jane's Churro Sounds logo, the Night Owl Lounge logo, the Midwest Night Watchers, which I'm wearing tonight. And you can get them in all kinds of styles and colors. So please go there if you will and check it out. And thank you if you order.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's the link, folks. If you want to go there, go do some heavy shopping on Gerald's shop there, okay? And check him out. See what you might need, some of that Midwest Night Watcher merchandise, okay? And tell him Dennis sent you. He'll direct you that way anyway. You won't get a discount, but just tell him anyway. But we definitely will appreciate your support, and I'm sure Gerald does. And check his merchandise out, and also check his show out, which is what you got coming up next on your show there, Gerald.
We have Wednesday night, which is the Night Owl Lounge on Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Central. And that's one where we talk to the chat and we discuss whatever comes up. And this week, though, we're going to be talking about sound healing and vibrations and frequencies. So we got some videos to show you. So that'll be good. And we have a cryptid report to go over. And other than that, we will be back on Friday and Saturday on our Rumble channel to show some creepy movies. And like I said, we're not having a show on Easter because of Easter Sunday. So that night, I think we're going to be showing a couple movies dealing with Easter, which the one for sure is
going to be looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm setting up for a special show Wednesday night on Hunting the Shadows. I'm going to have an author on who is is going to talk about vampires. Okay, so you don't want to miss that. Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. And Friday night, of course, will be paranormal point of view. Who knows? I might show up with another mystery guest. You never know. And hopefully we'll get that done, absolutely. And don't forget our good friend Jessica, the Cryptid Huntress. Check her show out. We had a fantastic show today. Check her store out, War Woman Goods. Show her some love as well. And don't forget our good friend Lord Starfox, Kenny on Midnight Lycanthropy. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
Lycanthropy. And check him out and show his channel some love. And Danielle Diva Borzon, please show her channel some love. She needs some subscribers, so go subscribe. We're going to. She had to go into work today, so that's that hard-working woman there. And she's got tied up with that, so maybe just towards the weekend we'll do a show with that. But anyway, go check her channel out if you get a chance. And orange blossoms are good. Honeysuckle's my favorite. What about you, Joe?
I don't know. I when it comes to stuff like that, I like incense and candles, and I like lavender and stuff like that.
I'll just tell Shira, bring you a dozen roses and you'll be happy, Red. Yeah, all right. That was just a thought, Shira. Okay, don't get upset. Okay, but anyway, we appreciate you all being here tonight. Absolutely. And we thank you so much for your support and going down the road less traveled with us. And who knows where we'll end up next, but it'll be another strange destination, probably. But we appreciate you all so very much for being here and sticking with us. And be careful with that poison out there now.
That's
Don't let
right.
it get personal with you. And we will see you again soon. And until then, hope you have a fantastic week this week and an even better weekend coming down the line. It'll get here, folks. It's coming, okay? And it's bringing the Easter Bunny with it, okay? There you go. But we appreciate all of you so very much, your support and your family, okay, definitely. And we appreciate that from the bottom of our hearts. And until we get together again, which will be soon, hopefully, God willing, and the creeks don't rise. Take care of yourselves out there and be careful. Keep your head on swivel, an eye on your six, and let it be faith over fear, okay? Absolutely. Until we get together again, then, Godspeed and ciao.
Love and peace, everybody.